And what I'd suggest to you, the tides of change, the excitement of it, the new definitions, the next generation behind us are going to come up with an identity that is going to be startlingly different than where we've come from. So my invitation to you is not to necessarily come back, but rather to say, to think about coming back in the context of knowing you're entering a country that is flowing quickly, that's changing rapidly, and that is going to change shape, but it's not going to change its fundamental character. Martin Luther King said the tragedy of revolutions, Martin Luther King wrote from the Alabama jail. He said the tragedy of revolutions is that most of us sleep through them. The change in South Africa will accelerate. It won't calm down. Of course, we don't want it to accelerate in the unproductive areas. We want it to become more democratic. We want it to become more economically viable. We want the economic wealth to be shared more widely. We want to hear more of the next generation. But it is going to change. It's also going to be competitive because we will compete with each other, and so we should. And as of each of us become more comfortable in our identity, it is absolutely right that we engage our differences, we argue the issues, we assert our rights, and we build a nation. That's where nations, I believe, come from. And of course, as you all know, it's a beautiful country. I'm very fortunate. Every year I take a week or so and I try and drive in the off-road areas. You know, I just have to leave the central mess of Gauteng, Joburg, and sort of exit that engine of the economy, the mining camp, and just get sort of 50 k's down to Heidelberg and start heading down to KZN and go over those lovely mountains, past those lovely Drakensberg mountains and descend into KZN, KwaZulu, AmaZulu, the people of heaven. And to just drive through those lovely valleys, the Valley of 1,000 Hills, of Alan Paton's beauty, of Shaka's great nation, and realize the incredible dynamism and history of the country. And then you just slip from there into Durban, which is a sort of a Indian Ocean entrepot with a huge community that's come from India that often thinks it's Indian until it goes to India and then discovers it's South African. One of my colleagues at Gibbs is Indian, and she went to Mumbai for the first time and sent me an SMS. She said, I found my roots, they're Santon City. I think it's the same as coming here. When I came in the 70s, I thought maybe I'm English. It took about 3 weeks to realize, it's okay, I can deal with it, but my roots are there. And Durban's like that, this big, sprawling Zulu, Indian, white colonial city finding its own rhythm, and then to slip out from there along that beautiful coastline, the south coast, and just head your way along into that incredible area, that often barren and some very undeveloped mountainous Transkei, and to slip down to Mazeppa Bay and go through Butterworth and Umtata, which is sort of in Nigeria. It's kind of slipped off the radar, and we're struggling to hold on to some of these areas. But the heartland of our politics, of where much of our politics and struggle comes from. And then to slip through East London and Port Elizabeth, and then head through Plettenberg Bay and Knysna and George, and make your way through the wheatlands over that lovely ridge, and then find that little jewel of the mountain. My daughter Jordan is finishing her education in Scotland, and she and I have an ongoing joke about that mountain. When she was about 5, I made that drive over the hill, over the mountains, and there was Table Mountain. And I said to her, as we went over, I said, that's my mountain. And she looked at me, she said, that's not your mountain. I said, that's my mountain, Jordan. She said, it can't be your mountain. I said, that's my mountain. I just let a lot of other people use it. And even today, and many, many years later, whenever we see that mountain, I say, Jordan, that's my mountain. And I say that to her because there is something we as individuals need to own about the place, to own the heritage of it, to own and to feel we belong in it, and to deepen our sense of identity. And then from the lovely little Mediterranean city of Cape Town with Camps Bay and Third Beach and the lovely winelands, you can head up north. Amazing, up to those fishing in that very cold water at Langebaan and Saldanha, and then into the dusty Uppington with all its grapes, and then head east, back to Joburg, maybe through Kimberley, a very unknown, beautiful jewel of a mining history, of farming, extraordinary place, the place of great writers, and then back to Joburg. And in that week, you can see 7 climates, many cultures, vast, beautiful expanses. I think that's the story of South Africa. And I know if I say lunch bar and various other code words like cobra, stoop, polish, you'll all get miserable and immediately come home. Let me come to the end of what I want to say to you and talk a little bit about this frontier society and just share with you what I think a frontier is about. See, a frontier is not a normal place. A frontier is where there's conflict and it's open and there's contestation. And it's in the creativity of the contestation that exciting things get made. It's when forces meet that there's friction and something gets born out of that. And our story now has been born out of this conflict. As I say, not all of it pleasant. Joburg's like that. I come from Cape Town. It's why I asked how many of you come from Cape Town. I come from Cape Town, so I'm allowed to tell you this, that in colonial terms, Cape Town history is dated in 1652. Joburg's history, who are the Joburgers here? Hands up. Joburg's history, 1886. If you subtract 1652 from 1886, you get a beautifully symmetrical 234-year head start we Joburgers gave the Cape Townians. It took 6 years to go from one tent to the biggest city in Africa. That is Joburg. It's a mining camp. It's a tented camp that became a city in 6 years. It's still like that. It's restless. It is very sort of uncivilized in a sort of a way. It's a bare-knuckle town. It doesn't have any water. If you don't have water, you have a problem with your identity. But it's got that dynamism. Hillbrow remains the arrivals lounge for the world. I used to live there. Now Nigerians live there. We walked through there 3 weeks ago with all of our faculty and discovered the wonders of the subterranean world. Not all of it pleasant, but incredibly exciting. It's that kind of place. So I think South Africa will remain true to this character of being a frontier, of being a place of exploration, of being a place that causes ache and heartache, but also causes enormous joy. A place where you can really, really make a difference. We are short of talent. We are short of the kind of skills that you learn in a city like this. We need the technology. We desperately need to create jobs. From the country's point of view, that's why you should think of coming home. From your point of view, I think it has to do with making a great life, a life full of meaning in a place with meaning. So my generation, I think, have handed to the next generation in a relay race a great opportunity to run. And it is about the running. So let me end with a story about that, which I often share, about Josiah Tungwane. I don't know if you remember Josiah Tungwane, but he won the gold medal in the marathon in Atlanta. Do you remember? And I love telling the story because I was up at Sun City and I just finished giving a talk and I had a different shape then. I used to run marathons. And I went to my room to chill out, and I happened to, just by accident, turn on the beginning of the marathon. A friend of mine, Tony, was the sports commentator, and he said, 20 minutes into the race, he said, the problem of South Africans competing at this level is they go too fast too soon, because Josiah Tungwane was in the front. And his sort of prediction was he'll soon wear out. Anyway, Josiah Tungwane, as you know, won the race. He won the gold medal. Now, the 100 meters guy gets on the post toast his box tops, but the marathon guy is the heart of the Olympics, and Josiah Tungwane won the gold. 6 weeks later, I bumped into Tony in Joburg. I said, you made a right poople of yourself, but he said, no, it's much worse than that. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, he'd gone into the Olympic Village the night before. You know the Olympic Village? It's a place where they put 5,000 young people to run in the day and have sex at night. It's a very interesting... He'd gone into the Olympic Village and he was interviewing the main athletes, Ezekiel Sepeng and others, and he got to Josiah Tungwane. He didn't know him. Josiah Tungwane was a literate mine worker. And he turned off the camera. He said, what race are you in? He said, I'm in the marathon. He said, how are you going to do? He said, I'm going to win. So he got a bit of a skrik and he said, what do you mean you're going to win? He said, I'm going to win. So Tony says, what makes you say you're going to win? He says, when I run in Mpumalanga, there are 5,000 runners. There are only 150 here. I've always loved that story because that's the gees and the cheek of South Africa. Thanks very much for inviting me to share some thoughts. Thank you.